This afternoon we are looking at two men. First of which is named Jehoshaphat. Or Jehoshaphat. I don't know. I think people usually say Jehoshaphat, even though it's clearly got an H in there. Anybody think of anything in particular when you hear his name? Just me? What? Okay. He was one of the good kings? Yeah, well, I didn't even mean anything like that. I think of jumping Jehoshaphat. That's what I think about. I don't know where that came from, or if I made it up. I don't know, since nobody else thought of that. Have you ever heard it before? Okay. Poor guy, that's his legacy is... I don't even think he ever jumped, but he was one of Israel's Judah rather. He was one of the kings of the southern kingdom after it was divided. Jehoshaphat or Jehoshaphat, whichever one. His name means Jehovah is judge, and you can read about him in 1 Kings or 2 Chronicles. I just put the 2 Chronicles up there because it's simpler altogether. It's kind of spread out in 1 Kings, so a little bit easier just in the account in 2 Chronicles. He was the son of Asa, and he was, as we said, not just one of the good kings. You could say he arguably was one of the great kings of Judah, because as the text says, 2 Chronicles 17:4, he sought the God of his father and walked in his commandments and not according to the practices of Israel. So verse 3 says that God was with him because he walked in the earlier ways of his father David and didn't seek the Baals. And verse 5 says, therefore Jehovah established the kingdom in his hand. So he was one of the great kings. The book calls him here the man with a good record. He carried out religious reforms. He, again, if nothing else, a perfect description of him in 2 Chronicles 17 with the things I just mentioned. He walked in the ways of David, didn't seek the Baals. He sought the God of his father and walked in his commandments and didn't walk according to the practice of Israel. The kingdom was established in his hand. And verse 6 says his heart was courageous in the ways of Jehovah. And then he took the high places out of Judah, the high places of the Asherim out of Judah. And it says, based on his reforms, they taught in Judah, having the book of the law of Jehovah with them. It was a good day. It was a good time for the kingdom of Judah. And therefore God was with him and with them during his reign. The main thing that I think of when I think of Jehoshaphat, other than jumping Jehoshaphat, is the situation with Ahab in 1 Kings. Let me see, make sure I get it right here. I think it's the last chapter of 1 Kings. 1 Kings 22, which is also 2 Chronicles 18. Whenever Ahab was the king in the north, Jehoshaphat was the king of Judah. So if you remember from some of our studies in the past, Israel, the northern kingdom, never had a single good king. Every king, bad, evil. Ahab was one of them. Now, the reign of Ahab in the north coincided with the reign of Jehoshaphat in the south. So, but the strange thing is, they were friends. Maybe shouldn't say friends. They were friendly during the reign of these two kings who were obviously very different from each other. And if I remember correctly, the king's record doesn't really explain why. You can check that. Maybe that could be wrong. In 2 Chronicles 18, it says that they made a marriage alliance. So, yeah, I'm not sure what the exact connection was, but their peaceful relations were due to some sort of marriage alliance. Whether, I don't know if there's any more detail given, whether, I guess the most basic example would be, I don't know, Jehoshaphat's daughter married Ahab's son, something like that. I'm not suggesting that that's what it was, but that's the kind of thing you would normally think of. But it could have been some other arrangement. But they're when you're reading in 1 Kings 22, and suddenly you see Ahab's coming to Jehoshaphat and being kind of like on friendly terms and saying, hey, you want to help us out here, it kind of makes you scratch your head if you understand the animosity that existed between, they didn't like each other. That's why they split, so now we got Israel and Judah, and they were not really on friendly terms ever, but they were during the reign of one of the greatest kings of Judah and one of the worst kings of Israel. But what ended up happening there, we sort of already looked at it because we talked about Ahab, but Jehoshaphat comes and he says, we need to inquire of God about this battle. Smart. That's smart. He was smart. But Ahab had the whole game rigged, so he brought in all these prophets of Baal who came and told him exactly what he wanted to hear. But even then, Jehoshaphat wasn't satisfied, and he said, well, isn't there somebody else? Isn't there some other prophet? And he said, well, yeah, there's that Micaiah guy that I don't like because he always talks bad. And it is in this account in 2 Chronicles 18 where that infamous statement by Micaiah is made, that as Jehovah lives, what my God says, that will I speak. That's what I'm going to say. But it was the reason that all this happened is because Jehoshaphat said, I'm not satisfied with what I've heard from 400 prophets, your 400 prophets. Is there somebody else? Because we need to inquire of Jehovah on this. And ultimately, Jehoshaphat was protected in that, I guess you could say, but Ahab was not. Ahab ended up being killed in that battle, while Jehoshaphat was more or less protected because the enemy even tracked him down and stomped him and was ready to kill him because they thought it was Ahab. But I would say in the providence of God, the leader, I guess the general of the enemy said, you are not to kill anybody but Ahab, king of Israel. So even when they caught Jehoshaphat, his ally, they let him go. They didn't do anything, probably because he was such a faithful and good king and actually cared about what God wanted and said and wanted to know what other things God may have said or what God's will was. So just a few things then before we move on to Jephthah, who not so good things to talk about with him at least. He was one of the best kings of Judah. Okay, 1 Kings 15:24. Here's what it says. Actually, it doesn't say anything about that, so I don't know why you put that scripture reference there. But anyway, I would put 2 Chronicles 17 there that we already read. He had a godly father, so Asa, good example. Obviously, that would be a lot of the reason why Jehoshaphat turned out the way he did, because he had a dad who showed him a good example. He developed a system of religious instruction for the people. He cared about God's will. He cared about the law. He wanted to operate according to it. He wanted everything to be correct according to God's will. He commanded judges to be just, cared about justice. He trusted God for victory in crisis. A couple chapters later there, in chapter 20, he manifested weakness in his alliance with wicked kings. He was not a perfect man. Maybe we could say maybe wasn't the best idea to get in a marriage alliance with Ahab, which also means Jezebel. What a lovely Thanksgiving time they must have had with that woman and man. But not his greatest decision, but thankfully it doesn't seem that there was too much consequence to that alliance. He remained faithful, it seems, to God. Thankfully. So, Jehoshaphat, good. One of the good kings of Judah. There were not many, but he was certainly one of them. Right up there with Hezekiah, Josiah, and maybe two or three others, one or two others. Thoughts on Jehoshaphat? If you find the verse where he's jumping, please tell me, because I want to know. Yeah, jumping Jehoshaphat. It's a term of exclamation, you know. Could be worse. Hopefully he's not too offended with us, with people taking his name in vain. I don't know. It's an honor, I guess. Okay. Sorry for Jehoshaphat, we don't have that much else to say. But Jephthah. Yeah. What in the name of jumping Jephthah? Doesn't sound as good. Jephthah is a tragic, his story is it is really a tragedy, a genuine Shakespearean tragedy. All the more tragic because it was totally self-inflicted. Jephthah was the 9th judge of Israel. We read about him in Judges chapter 11. His name means he opens or he sets free. Yeah, kind of strange if that's truly what it means. But he was the 9th judge. He made a very rash vow. He is a case study in why, at the very least, we shouldn't make hasty vows, and arguably maybe just don't make any vows, as we'll see when we wrap it up here. The vow that he made was that the first thing that walks out of my house when I get home from battle, I will sacrifice to Jehovah. Can't help but wonder if he immediately regretted those words coming out of his, right as soon as he said it, like, maybe shouldn't have said that. What a stupid thing to vow. I don't know what his expectations were. I don't know what he thought could have happened. But at any rate, that is pretty much his legacy. And as the story goes, as the account goes, we're told that he's a mighty man of valor. I guess he was a good judge as far as that goes. I mean, a good leader, that he was in the way he was expected to lead. It says that he was one upon whom the Spirit of the Lord descended. But this vow in Judges 11, the first, let's see, how long is the chapter? The first almost, 2/3, I guess, or so of the chapter is the record of God delivering Israel at his hand, by his hand, just like the other judges. In chapter 4, God delivers the people by the hand of Deborah and Barak, and then in chapter 6 and 7 and 8, Gideon. And then, as we go on, get to chapter 11, it's God delivering Israel at the hands of Jephthah, the ninth of the judges. But then, in verse 29, which is ironically the moment when it says the Spirit of Jehovah was on him, he goes through Gilead and Manasseh, passed on to Mizpah, and then he passed on to the Ammonites. And it says, and Jephthah made a vow to Jehovah and said, if you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever or whoever, depending on your translation. In the ESV, in my Bible, whatever's in the text, whoever's in the footnote. Yours could be the opposite, I don't know. Whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites shall be Jehovah's, and I will offer it up, or him up, for a burnt offering.
That makes it sound like because you would anticipate that a loved one would be running out to greet you when you return from battle.
Yeah.
So maybe that showed that he understood the gravity of what he was asking of God. Like he was asking God to do something big for him, and he was like, I'm willing to do something big.
Yeah, but the confusing thing is, at what point did Jephthah think that Jehovah would ever be pleased or by a human sacrifice? But if it actually says him in verse 31 instead of it, and whoever in verse 31, I don't know what let's see, what could the options have been? Well, here's one thought. A slave of some kind, maybe? Household servant? Yeah. Maybe that's what his mind was thinking of. I don't know. I mean, what did he think a goat was going to come out of the door or something? I don't know. Did he keep goats in his house? I doubt it. Do they have a dog? Was it normal for his daughter to come out to meet him or to greet him? I'm presuming he seems to have been a seasoned, he says he was a mighty warrior. So maybe he'd gone out to battle many times, but maybe not in this capacity. So there's just so many question marks. But it doesn't take away from the gravity of the situation. It was a foolish thing. Now, the worst part is the very last prepositional phrase. And I say the worst part. It's the worst part actually, and the worst part as far as the reader is concerned and interpretation-wise, because it really leaves no room. He says he's going to offer him up for a burnt offering. It can only mean one thing. And that is that you'll be killed. The one will be killed and, burned, just like they did with the animal sacrifices. Does anybody else hear that? Is it just me? I can't tell if it's outside or if this is getting bumped. So if you can. Yeah, there's a knocking. It sounds like it's coming from that speaker, but I don't think it is because I'm not touching it. Okay, good. So it turns into a great tragedy because, as we've already said, he gets home. God keeps his end of the deal. I would be very careful to say that he did it because of this bargain because, again, God he has not been pleased, never was pleased with human sacrifice, never would be.
Well, I wasn't thinking like a bargain. I was thinking kind of like Hannah or situations where people had said, Lord, if you, she's like, if you bless me with a child, I'll give him back.
Yeah.
That kind of, I just thought maybe that's what he was, but
Yeah, it was, I think, not to cut him too much slack.
God answered his prayer.
Yeah, God, well, that's why he was raised up. Was to see, to deliver Israel from the oppressor, which in his day was the Ammonites. So that's what was going to be done all along. He didn't have to make that vow. The reason that this is even being recorded is because he was the ninth judge. God was delivering the people from in answer to their cry, just like he did with Gideon, just like he did with Deborah and the other judges, and Samson, and so on. So he made this rash vow. I can't help but think, like I already said, that he did expect some person to come out. He had to have a person in mind because it wouldn't make any other sense. unless there's some other meaning from the doors of my house. Unless that can mean something else, there's nothing that could come out of the door of the house except a person. So the question will be, what person did he expect to come out at first? But as we go on down in verse 32, it says, Jehovah gave them into his hand. He struck them down. Then verse 34 says, then Jephthah came to his home at Mizpah. And behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. Every day when I get home, both of my daughters greet me with tambourines and dances. It gets kind of old, but they mean well. Gets worse and worse, though. She was his only child. And besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. So, presumably, naturally, she would have been a virgin daughter. She was his only daughter. She was his only child. And now he realized he's messed up. Soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, alas, my daughter, you've brought me very low. Kind of blaming her almost. You've become the cause of great trouble to me. No, sir, you were the cause of the great trouble. For I have opened my mouth to Jehovah. See, there's the problem. I can't take back my vow. So, from his own lips, what mistake did he make? He opened his big mouth when he didn't need to. There are very few times when a person opens their mouth when they don't need to, that good comes from it. Sometimes it's better to just keep it shut. I mean, couldn't he have just asked God to help to give him into their hand? To give them into his hand? Of course he could have. He could have vowed something else. I'll do this. I don't know. Anything, really. But he decided to say, I'll offer as a burnt offering whoever walks out first. Obviously, the last thing he would have expected is for his daughter to come out. But she did. And now I can't take it back. There's kind of a double lesson here as far as your word goes. And this, in my opinion, is why the instruction exists, just not to make oaths. It's because a vow that you vow to God was viewed by them, and as far as I'm concerned, we should still view it as a sin to break. If you vow to God that you're going to do something, you would be sinning not to do it.
Which is what we do when we obey the gospel. We're making a vow.
Yeah. Solomon dealt with it in Ecclesiastes about if you vow a vow to God, you better keep it, because God doesn't take pleasure in fools, and it would be better for you to not even vow than to vow and not keep. So here's the pickle that Jephthah was in. It's a sin to not keep your oath that you made by the name of Jehovah, right? Period. No matter what the vow was. Even if the vow was, I'm going to sacrifice my daughter. But it's also a sin to sacrifice your daughter. Now see the predicament? I've got two options and they're both sin. The incredible thing is the one he picked. Well, if I got to pick a sin or a sin. Now, if it be a sin to kill my daughter, but it also be a sin to not kill my daughter, I'll tell you the sin I'm picking. Yeah.
I don't know, though, in that time, if that's how they looked at it.
this is why he's a tough subject, because in a very, very small way, you almost admire how much he see, from where he is, it's not just that he vowed it, but he has now lived through God paying his end, right? God did his thing, because according to his silly, irresponsible vow, if you will do this, I will do this. Well, I said it, and God did it. So now, what would I be saying if I didn't hold to my end, even though my lovely only daughter, the vow I made was to offer you as a burnt offering. So he kind of leaves it in the open, other than he says, I can't take it back. But then the most amazing thing of all is her reaction. In verse 36, she said, to paraphrase, well, Dad, you got to do what you got to do. Yeah. So she says, Father, you've opened your mouth to Jehovah. You have to do to me whatever, according to whatever you said. Did he? He didn't tell her what it was, did he? Yet. But at the same time, I think she must have known, because she keeps going, even though there's a break in the quote. But she says, like I just said, now that God has done what you asked, you've got to do according to whatever came out of your mouth. But then she had one little request. First she said, I want you to do this for me. Give me 2 more months, so that I can go up and down on the mountains and mourn over my virginity. What does that have to do with anything? Yeah, she's going to die a virgin, and clearly the mourning virginity is a direct reference to, I'm going to die childless. That's it. Not, I'm going to die a virgin. But she won't ever be able to be a mother or give her father grandchildren, and so on. That's why she doesn't say, so I can weep for my life. She wants to weep for her virginity. But that's what she means. Although some commentators seem to want to read into this, and we'll touch on that in just a second. But I'll tell you what I probably would have done. Dad, just give me 2 months so I can go. Yeah, I ain't coming back. But she came back. Yeah, I guess she, in a way, did it for her dad. Because if she ran away, then he's broken his vow. So apparently she wasn't even willing to be the blame. Like, she could have reasoned, well, yeah, he will have broken his vow, but it's not his fault, it's my fault. So I'm okay with that. I'll just run away. And God can't hold him accountable for that. She didn't even apparently view it that way. She went, and for 2 months, she mourned, and then at the end of the 2 months, verse 39, she returned to her father. Mm-hmm. Leave it to Roman to find a loophole. He didn't say when. He could have once she comes down with a terminal disease or something. He could wait until, or maybe he was on his deathbed, or something. She gets run over by a carriage, or something happens. Now I'll sacrifice you, you know. Yeah, he didn't say when, but the point is, I'm going to do it, you know, in a timely fashion. 2 months, okay, sure. But she comes back. That may be the most, I said her reaction is amazing, but the fact that she came back after 2 months may trump that. I mean, that's just incredible to think about. We talk about, you know, how Isaac was old enough to understand what was going on, and he still went and went along with what Abraham was telling him. Well, she's in a similar situation. She knew for sure. The text, or the verse then, verse 39 ends and says that he did with her according to his vow that he had made. She had never known a man, and it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went year by year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in the year. So for 4 days, the Israelites had that custom that they would go every year and have some sort of thing to lament her. Not even giving her name. But just out of curiosity, does anybody's Bible say something different in the second half of verse 39 where it says she had never known a man? That's Judges 11:39. Had no. Okay, so that's same tense, or close enough to the ESV there. I think some of the old King James and the New King James I see, and the Old American Standard sort of leave a little bit of a door open. Even the Lexham English Bible, which is generally a generally reputable translation, it says, at least the Old King James, New King James say, she knew no man. You see the difference there in the tense? That leaves a door open for somebody to say, he didn't really kill her. The sacrifice that was made was that she was to remain a virgin for her whole life. And they tie that in with, that's why she wanted to go out and lament, weep for her virginity. Well, she wanted 2 months to go off and mourn over the fact that she could have mourned for the rest of her life. Maybe she didn't want to. Yeah, I know. It's just, I think this is people who are tripped up maybe over false interpretations of the fact that God seems to have gone along with it, which is not necessarily true. Just because God did give them into his hand doesn't mean he gave them into his hand because he vowed that. Verse 32 has no connection whatsoever with verses 30 and 31. Jephthah, God raising up Jephthah began in verse 1. It's already begun. God is using him to deliver the Israelites. That's the whole reason that he's been raised up.
That whole, just her having to be a virgin, like when he makes a vow, he's going to sacrifice whatever walked out of the house. So it wasn't like whatever walked out of the house, you have to remain a virgin. Like that wasn't what his.
Yeah.
That he didn't mean that.
Well, I guess maybe what these people might be saying is that he didn't actually go through with the letter to the letter of what he said, but he sacrificed her in another way. You know, but that's why I pointed out at the beginning. The key phrase is for a burnt offering. You can't vow somebody to be a perpetual virgin as a burnt offering. What are you burning? You're burning. Don't even know how you could twist that to make it into something. You're burning every potential marriage contract that could ever be written for her. I mean, it makes no sense. He vowed to offer a burnt offering. So Whenever we see that paired with he did according to his vow, he offered his daughter as a burnt offering. Just there's no way to get around it. And I think the ESV is probably closer when it says she had never known a man, not she never knew a man, because that makes it sound like, well, yeah, see, it says she didn't know a man, so she never knew a man for the rest of her life. Well, that is true, but the point of the statement was, in the context, she died a virgin. She never got to get married. She never got to have children, and so on and so forth. So that's why it's such a tragedy, because he actually went through with it. Now, the most difficult thing of all, okay, doesn't come from Judges at all. I hate to bring this up at 146. If I could spell, it would help. Hebrews 11:32. Anybody familiar with Hebrews 11? Anybody familiar with what we normally say about anybody's name who is found in Hebrews 11? Well, guess whose name is in Hebrews 11? Jephthah. That's a head scratcher, isn't it? Yeah, God knows best. Maybe, here's I'll just give you my personal opinion. Look at the names around Jephthah. Barak, Samson, Gideon. I take that passing reference to Jephthah probably to just be a reference to the part that he played in the history of God's people in the same way that Gideon did, even though Gideon certainly looks better in the record than Jephthah does. The way Samson did, although Samson's story is... Yeah. Samson, though, his end, he had to come around. Jephthah, the account of Jephthah just ends. So we're not really... I don't think he has a come up, but he's in chapter 12 as well, but there's not really anything that addresses how he repented of, doing that and whatnot. But it's just interesting that his name is found in Hebrews 11. So maybe there's more to his story. I hope that's the case, that the writer of Hebrews knew about that we don't know about. Or maybe it's just a reference to the part that he played in the first half of chapter 11. Well, I think that could be a pretty strong case to make that Samson died lost too, but we'll talk about that in 2034 whenever we get to Samson in this study. But I only got one lesson from Jephthah, and it comes from James chapter 5, verse 12. But above all, brothers, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth or by any other, but let your yes be yes and your no, no, that you may not fall under condemnation. Very good advice. Is it a sin to make an oath? This is an ongoing debate, right? You can't swear an oath. If you go to court, just affirm and all this. Well, I don't mean to sound sarcastic or anything or condescending, but if somebody's conscience, if their heart tells them that they should not swear, then thankfully our system as of now allows you to affirm. But I would probably argue they're really the same thing. You're really doing the same thing. The advice here is based on how you can get yourself in trouble when you vow, because sometimes we do stupid things, don't we? And even more often, we say stupid things. So if we're vowing a vow, we might make the same stupid mistake that Jephthah made and get ourselves in a pickle that was totally of our own making.
Some people do that with like marriage now, like hastily jump into a marriage. And
Yeah.
if I don't, this doesn't work out, I'll just, start over again after, like, that's just one job with people.
Yeah. Vows mean nothing, basically. Because, yeah, I'll vow this, but if I change my mind later, we'll just undo the vow. Well, then it wasn't much of a vow, was it? So, the safest road in terms of oaths is just to not do it. Then you can't get in trouble. But again, this is assuming that we hold our own word to the same standard that Jephthah held his word and that people generally held their word back then. I've said it, I got to do it, especially since I brought Jehovah into it. So the sad thing is today, people don't count their word as anything. Nothing they say matters. I don't care if I said I'm going to do this. I don't have to if I don't want to. People say things all the time. You think I actually meant that? Well, yeah, I did think you meant it because you said it. But James's advice is just let your yes be yes and your no, no. Just keep it simple. Say it simple. This is the way it is, and don't swear, I guess, in sort of a reactive way, swearing like you think about Peter whenever he was denying Jesus and he started swearing. We use that word like cussing. He started cussing at him. I don't think that's what Peter did. I think he started I swear I don't know the man. I swear, and you could say, I swear by the name of Jehovah that I don't know that man. Now, if he would have said that, he probably would have been even a bigger mess than he was in, because now he has lied by the name of, he used God's name and lied, you see. So it does say that he started, I think he uses a word like that. He started, with an oath or whatever saying it. So by what James said, just let your yes be yes and your no, no. Not to lie like Peter was doing, but don't bring in the vowing and the oaths and the swearing. You'll save yourself some trouble, he says, if you don't do that. Jephthah could tell you that. Maybe nobody learned it any harder way than Jephthah learned it. I bet he never made another vow like that. I'm not sure what you're referring to. In Esther? Oh, John the Baptist. You said Vashti. I thought you said Vashti. Oh, okay. Yeah. He got himself in an issue like that, and Darius did with the lion's den. He went along with that, and now he's got to go through with it and even though he didn't want to, and Herod was sad that he got himself in that situation because he didn't want to see that happen, and could have saved all these people could have saved themselves some trouble if they just hadn't made such rash vows. But we can make that mistake too. We may not vow to sacrifice as a burnt offering. The first person that talks to me today, I'm going to offer as a burnt offering. But we might vow things like has already been alluded to. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to devote my life to you. And by life, I mean 4 hours a week, right? On Sunday and Wednesday. Not quite. So don't make the same mistake as Jephthah made.